As I was sitting in the audience, I was thinking of that one word. I heard it a couple of times, and it really resonated with me. It's only 3 letters, but how powerful it is in that word of why. How many of us in this room have thought about it? Why? Why me? Why this cancer? Why didn't this work? And so I was thinking to myself, why? Why am I here? Since I lost my wife, which we'll talk about in a minute, I've had to ask those questions. Why? What is my purpose? So I want to tell you very quickly an interesting story that happened with the why and how sort of life works. I work with another organization that touched our lives towards the end of our life. And so since then, I've sort of worked with them, and I've spoke about ocular melanoma. I talk about you all the time. I talk about this disease all the time. I talk about our journey all the time and how rare it is and how most of us, and how it affects your life. And so anyways, I had this opportunity, and as I was preparing for tonight, I'm not sure how many folks are here, maybe 100. It was June of last year, I spoke to about 1,500 in Las Vegas. And that was easier than talking with you tonight. Because those folks I didn't know, and those folks I was talking about love and about this disease and telling them about it, and I wanted to educate them and tell them about what you go through every day and how it affects your life. But what do I say to folks who I know what you're going through? What can I say? How can I make a difference? So anyways, when I was in Vegas, it was interesting. We were doing a fundraiser. Actually, they were doing a fundraiser, and they were trying to educate their staff. They were a pharmaceutical company. And the organization I actually help is called Dream Foundation. And Dream Foundation, hopefully you'll never need to meet them or know anything about them, because it's when you're at the end of your journey when there are no more options. So anyways, turned out that the organization that asked me to speak was the organization that funded our dream trip. And when I spoke, the kind lady who drove down to Moorhead, Kentucky to present our dream was in the audience, and I had a chance to meet her. So how life makes a complete full circle. It could have been any organization. It could have been any person. But for some reason, actually, I was asked to speak with that organization, had a chance to thank that individual who made such a big difference in our life. So I said, I speak about you all the time. And then I asked myself, why? Like, why am I here? And when Lauren had asked me if I would come and speak, my first thought was, of course, anything I can do to help. But then I thought, what can I do? How can I make a difference? How can I help folks with this disease? So the first answer to the question of why is, this is Leanne. This is Leanne and I. This is my wife. This is actually, a picture was taken on our 27th wedding anniversary. And I challenge each and every one of you to have a marriage where your wife will look at you like that after 27 years of marriage. My wife knew me best, which sort of is part of the problem. And she accepted me for all my faults, and there were many of those, but yet she still had that look. I met my wife in 1980. She was my sister's best friend in high school. We didn't know each other then through high school. We dated for a couple of years, and my wife knew much better about what she wanted than I did. I was I was a bonehead, and so we dated for a little while, and then we didn't. And then I went and joined the Navy, and Leanne went and met someone else, and she started a family. Unfortunately for them, fortunately for me, that didn't work out. And so in 1986, we got together, and we were together for many, many years until July 2nd of 2011, 6 months before our 25th wedding anniversary. My wife would be diagnosed with ocular melanoma. And we found that OM would try to consume every aspect of our life, and it truly could have had we not taken steps to prevent it. I don't know if you found that in your life, but I can tell you that the diagnosis is shocking, and it really rocked us to our core, and really it's all we could talk about, it's all we could think about. During our military career, we moved 19 times to 11 states with 5 children, which you can imagine was very difficult. However, the OM battle would be much more difficult than anything we ever encountered in the military. I remember as a caregiver, I remember those words. I remember as if it was yesterday. I remember the doctor saying to us, and how heavy those words were, "You have ocular melanoma." I remember thinking, ocular melanoma. We all both thought about it. What is that? Ocular, isn't it eye? Melanoma, isn't that cancer? I didn't know you could get eye cancer. We it just couldn't process and digest that. I remember struggling initially with accepting that diagnosis, with comprehending what does this mean? It just didn't make any sense. And I remember being told by our doctor that we had 3 options, not 10, not 20, but 3. Proton beam, plaque, or enucleation. I didn't even know I never even heard of proton beam. Actually, in plaque, I thought plaque was something you had on your teeth. And enucleation, what is that? I never knew the technical term for having your eye removed. And then our doctor told us that we only had one option, and that was enucleation. So one thing I'm going to talk about tonight is actually lots of tips that we learned along the way, and one of them was to be proactive and to ask for that second opinion when things just don't make a lot of sense. And so luckily for us, we didn't take our initial doctor's diagnosis. We didn't actually take his suggestion, and we went and got a second opinion, and my wife was able to have the plaque therapy, and she didn't lose her eye. I remember trying to help my wife through the shock and anxiety of her cancer diagnosis. I remember our struggles as we together struggled to comprehend and accept that my wife had cancer, eye cancer. This didn't make any sense. I remember trying to process our limited treatment options and understanding the potential side effects of each one of them. It's just so much to comprehend. And needing to learn and understand as much as possible about ocular melanoma. And for me as a caregiver, struggling, as the caregiver, you're the protector, you're the husband, you're the person that's supposed to make everything okay. And for the first time, I struggled to help my wife make that decision. I'm no doctor, I don't know. And it was an important decision, an irreversible decision. And I remember finding it very difficult. And I remember the need to support my wife, to help her as she made her difficult treatment decision and not really being certain of what to do, where to turn, who to talk to. And for us, none of our family or friends had ever heard of OM. And I remember feeling so very alone, like we were the only family in the world who had ocular melanoma. And I'm being so thankful of organizations like MRF, because here in this room, you're no longer alone. Here we were a family. Here we met folks who understood, who were going through something very similar that we were going through. We could share stories, experiences, doctor's notes, whether someone saw a doctor in this part of the country, that part of the country, and what they were experiencing, what they were being told, we can compare notes. So we were no longer alone. And I remember through the OMF and other treatments, we had this family. But I also remember the unexpected effects. We got to know these folks so well. Everyone in this room, we get to know them so well. We loved them. And we became part of their journey, and we wanted to know how they were doing. And it was great when they had success. Yeah, can't speak today. But then if they didn't have a success, their journey became our journey. And we had to learn actually to create boundaries. And we had to learn really when enough was enough about OM, and we had to focus on life, not ocular melanoma. I remember the stress and anxiety, expense, and rigor of so many road trips for follow-up visits with seeing the eye doctor, oncologist visits, biopsy appointments, hospital stays, treatments. I remember and scanxiety. I think you can all probably actually recognize and relate to those terms. And I remember the cost and toll that OM had on our time, our nerves, our life, and the effect that it took on our personal life, our finances, and our look for the future. And because I remember our journey, I am continuing where my wife, Mahani, cannot, to share what we learned and experienced to help at least one person here. Hopefully by sharing the lessons that we learned and the information that we discovered along the way, we hope to help other families diagnosed with this disease. Hopefully we can make your journey easier, even by just a little. This is my wife with one of her many doctor visits to see Dr. Sato, and this was her attitude. She was going to kick OM. So some of the things that we learned along the way was hope. And hope had many actually meanings. The H stood for several things. One of them was humor. We needed to keep humor in our life, find things that were fun, to not just focus on OM, to go back to what things that we enjoyed doing. actually to have that good belly laugh and really to think about things that were fun and find the joy in life. Health. We had to remember actually to take care of our health because at times this can be all consuming and we can sort of ignore the things we used to do in the past. We can sort of not worry about, before you know it, you're traveling and you're eating actually things you don't normally eat. You're not exercising, you're sitting in the car, actually you're actually just not as mobile, and you just can't focus on some of the things you did before because of this disease. And then remember having heart. Cancer can cause anxiety, stress, pain, discomfort, fatigue, lack of sleep. And we had to remember to keep love and compassion in our heart, in our words, and in our actions. And then we had to remember we were human, that we had limits, and that we needed to ensure that we took time to rest, to get away, to take a break and get away from cancer, treatment conversations, and just be people, and actually to enjoy the things that we did in life. The O meant several things. One was oncology research. We found the more we knew, the more empowered we were. To be optimistic. Actually, to look at the glass half full, not half empty. Actually, that there are treatment options and that there are folks having successes and that every day is a new day. Treatment options, that there are options. And then during our first initial diagnosis, it was about learning about the eye. Really, what is ocular melanoma? What does it do to the eye? What is it going to do to my vision? What are actually, and the more we knew, the better we felt. The hardest part for us was not knowing. The P for us meant positive. We found along the journey that we had to remain positive. To play. You know, we think of the word play as actually as children, but we had to remember to play, to keep play in our life, to be playful, and really to keep recreation and do the things that really were fun. Persistence. This is one of the lessons that we learned was to persist. As I mentioned before, had we not been persistent, my wife would have lost her eye. There were times where we had to make that second follow-up call. There were the times where we had to call because we didn't get a script that we were expecting, or we were waiting on the scheduling of a test. We had to be persistent in every aspect of our journey. To be a problem solver. To be proactive. Patience. I think we find that when we're tired, we're stressed, having patience is really, very difficult. I found it necessary to take a deep breath, to think twice and speak once, and to always let love and compassion overrule any other emotion that I was feeling. Partnering. We found that being a caregiver was a team effort. It wasn't just something I would do on my own. Pretend. Pretend that you don't have cancer, that cancer is not part of your life. We found that we had to pretend and just live life. My wife and I, we had two mantras during our journey. The first mantra was, so what, now what? And what that meant was, whatever happened, so what, now what do we do about it? And then the second one was, we have cancer. Cancer does not have us. Priorities. We had to actually create priorities. And we found through our cancer diagnosis that we had to rearrange our priorities. And that living life and things we put on the back burner, wait till tomorrow, we may do today. The E was for emotion. Be there for your patient. Not just for the physical needs, but actually for the emotional needs, to be there to listen. Maybe just, even you're not going to fix it, just go ahead and just listen. Empathy. Encouragement. Exercise. Exercise can do so much for your body. It's good for the heart, it's good for the soul, it's good for the mind. We found we needed to educate ourselves, to learn. Enjoyment. And escape. The final one was escape. We needed to escape cancer, to not let it actually rule every part of our life. Caregiving for someone with ocular melanoma often involves different types of support and tasks, which can be overwhelming. These were areas that we had to manage all of our duties, the caregivers, to help cope and assist our loved one. Some suggestions were to create schedules to help ensure things got done, to stay organized, tracking expenses, to stay positive, and to know yourself. I found that owning can be an extremely emotional journey. As a caregiver, I found it was necessary to help my wife through every difficult decision. I found sometimes it was just good for me just to listen, not to fix it, not to have a comeback, not to speak, but just to listen, to let my wife tell me what was on her mind and what was on her heart. And we found during our journey that expenses were high, funding was low, and we had to look for alternatives for our travel and lodging during many of our trips. And we discovered a network of no or low-cost travel. You know, this is not the version, this is actually a different version of what I submitted, so it's a little out of context. I'm going to just stop for a minute because this is sort of dry. What I'm really here to tell you is that this is a difficult journey. And I was hoping actually to share with you some of the things that we learned along the way. And as I mentioned, talking to 1,500 people was so much easier than talking to this group here. Because what can I offer you except things you already know and things that I can't change? All I can share with you is actually lessons that we learned. These are some resources that we had come across that maybe will help you. When my wife was diagnosed with cancer, we lived in Colorado. We had just become empty nesters for the first time in 28 years. And we gave up our life in Colorado. We gave up our life as being empty nesters to move closer to family and friends. And that move was during a time where we just lost our job. So we found that, as I mentioned earlier, just a minute ago, that actually expenses were high and actually income was low. And so we had to find a way to actually to pursue treatment, to live life. And I found that there are some resources for all of us. This one is Host for Hospitals. It's in Philadelphia, and they match homeowners with patients, and they'll allow you to stay in their home for free. There's Hospitality Homes, which is the Boston area. There's a Healthcare Hospitality Network, which is nationwide, which if you find yourself in need of a place to stay, they will help you. There's Hope Lodge, and there are 30 of them across the nation. There are travel assistance organizations that will help you arrange transportation if you don't have it. And there's an organization that if you find yourself in need of a clinical trial, they will help you as well. It's called LaserX Cancer Foundation. They have a clinical trial navigator that will help you. They also have a financial assistance program. And their mission is to improve the outcome of cancer care, giving hope, dignity, and life. Since losing my wife, I've tried to focus not on the loss, but my wife's wishes. And if she were here today, she would want me to help others. It is my hope to continue our battle against OM, to fulfill my wife's wishes and her legacy by helping the Ocular Melanoma Foundation, MRF, find a cure. Ocular melanoma will regretfully and forever be part of my life, and hopefully we can make a difference and it won't be the last part of yours. Thank you, I'm sorry.